Yeah. So yes, as Roche said, I'm Livy Hanks. I'm the Climate Justice Lead for Quakers in Britain. Work very closely with Faith for the Climate, and I am within my role with Quakers, I'm part of the Make Polluters Pay campaign. I'm actually not the coordinator. The coordinator is Charlotte Kennedy of Stamp Out Poverty, who I think is on this call. I might be able to give you a wave. And we're just in the process of kind of expanding the campaign and building the coalition. So it's a really exciting time to get involved. I'm going to be talking about loss and damage, which I hope will be a familiar term to some of you and who've probably heard me talk about it before, but it may well be new to some of you. So I wanted to start just by showing a very short 2-minute video produced by the International Institute for Environment and Development. And this video features Ineza Grace, who is a young Rwandan climate activist. So let me just share my... Right, sorry, let me know if you can't hear this. There should be sound.
I was born and raised in Rwanda. During my lifetime, our temperature has increased far more than the global average. This was not driven by us. People in the least developed country, like mine, emit 35 times less carbon than those in high-income countries. Rwandans rely heavily on the land, and we are used to coping with the long rainy season and the challenge of our mountainous landscape. But climate change is making things worse, and we are being pushed beyond our ability to adapt. Rain, erode soil, and kill livestock. Land degradation affects the whole community, displacing thousands. My family had a small and cozy home, but like so many others, had to live with just their clothes and bags, forced to move to a communal house. The last period of intense rainfall lasted for 5 months. It destroyed roads and health centers, leading to over 130 deaths. These damages are profound. These losses are irreversible. Climate change disproportionately affects rural girls and women. Daily tasks such as collecting water and cooking wood are made increasingly difficult by droughts and floods that wash away agricultural income, leaving them with nothing. Youth-led climate action can bring these stories of loss and damage that go unseen and unheard to the fore.
We have the power and the knowledge to develop solutions, but we need the right financial support. Our call is for developed countries of the world to listen and to act.
So that's one very brief introduction to the... Oh, sorry, turn my... I'm going to share my slides now and tell you a little bit about the Make Polluters Pay campaign. So we are a campaign that was originally started up by Stamp Out Poverty and was expanded last year to be more of a coalition-based campaign. And essentially, what we're calling for is a loss and damage fund paid for by the biggest polluters. So as you heard in that video, there is an urgent need for finance. There's an urgent need for finance to support communities already most affected by climate disasters. And at the moment, there simply isn't any international fund for this. And rich countries are resisting calls for action because they don't want to pay up. They don't want any to open up the discussion of compensation and liability, because that potentially opens them up to huge claims for finance. But this is it's an emergency, it's a humanitarian disaster, and it's a huge moral injustice. And that was one kind of driving reason why this became a priority issue for the Interfaith Make COP Count coalition in the run-up to COP26. So the work that we want to do now and are encouraging you to get involved with is kind of continuation and building on those beginnings that we worked on over the last 18 months or so. So as you saw in Inez's video, loss and damage basically refers to the major impacts of climate change, which can be extreme weather events like hurricanes, but also slow moving events like sea level rises. And loss and damage refers to financial costs, but also non-economic losses, which means basically the things you can't put a price on. So loss of life, loss of culture and habitats and sacred lands and sites. So this is really it's a human tragedy on a massive scale. And it's not something that has occurred by accident. This is a crime on a monumental scale as well, because we know who's responsible for the climate crisis. It's the richest, the most polluting countries of the world, and it's the fossil fuel companies, and they're not taking responsibility. So even though loss and damage is referenced in the Paris Agreement, it's acknowledged as an area where action is needed, but there's still no money. And small island states have been calling for finance for loss and damage for 30 years. It's an issue that was first raised in 1991, but there's still no fund. So, as I said, we're a coalition-based campaign made up of, this isn't quite everyone actually, this is what I could fit on one screen, but we've got about, I think 60 organisations have signed our declaration calling for a climate damages tax on fossil fuel extraction to pay for loss and damage. So we're a real mixture of big NGOs, faith-based organisations, smaller grassroots campaigns. And we're pretty new. We only really got going last year, and in the second half of last year really, but we did manage to have some impact in our work in the run up to and at COP26. So we were there in Glasgow, and you can see here two of the key moments that we were part of. An interfaith vigil with this amazing artwork. You can see the lit up sign saying loss and damage, which was on display just outside the official venue, so that negotiators and everyone who was in those official spaces could see loss and damage lit up in front of them as they came out. And we held a vigil with Interfaith Glasgow and lots of other groups alongside that sign one evening. And we were also present on the main climate justice march in the middle of COP26, and there you can see the banner of the Loss and Damage Youth Coalition, which is an international campaign group led by young people from the Global South. And we're still developing our plans for this year. As I say, we're just in the process of kind of expanding our campaign and our coalition. But we know that we want to help shift the narrative so that more people are talking about loss and damage as a fundamental issue of climate justice. And we want to get more people talking about the link between fossil fuel companies and loss and damage, and really making it clear where responsibility lies. We want to work to build political support, and we'll be doing that at a national level, but also encouraging our members and supporters to talk to members of Parliament and members of the Scottish Parliament who can help raise the issue. We want to build the movement. Obviously, this is a global issue. It's a fundamental issue of global justice. So we want to build an international, help build an international movement, strengthen ties with climate justice campaigners elsewhere in the world, and learn from experts and people with first-hand lived experience of loss and damage. And we want to make sure that we're seizing key moments during the year to raise the profile of loss and damage, such as UN Climate Week in September, COP27 in November, and other key moments throughout the year. So there's a very strong faith involvement in this campaign. You probably saw some of the logos. We've got various faith bodies signed up to the declaration. Christian Aid are closely involved, as are we, Quakers in Britain. Tear Fund are signed up. So it's it's not a specifically faith-based campaign, but there's a very strong faith component, and I think there's lots of things we can do to really put a kind of bring a distinctive faith voice to this work and really stress the this as a moral issue, and bring our strong kind of moral voices to that. So if you're interested in getting involved, and we'll post the links in the chat as well, you can sign up to our mailing list and find out more as our plans for action develop. If you're part of an organisation, you can invite your organisation to sign our declaration, which is available on our website. And you're also welcome, if you'd like to get more people in your faith community talking about loss and damage. We're working on a kind of conversation starter guide, and we've also got a guide to holding a vigil in your community, which is something that we were encouraging people to do for the first ever Loss and Damage Awareness Day back in last September. But there's plenty more key moments where you might have an opportunity, whether it's a kind of a political moment like COP27, or whether there's something going on locally and you think there's an opportunity to raise people's awareness of this issue. There's a guide to how to hold a vigil. And that's everything from me. I think we've got a couple of minutes for questions, if anyone would like to ask anything.
Any questions from anyone for Livy? If there isn't any straight away, I might use my facilitator privilege to ask, are there any key dates this year that you think are important for the campaign?
Yeah, good question. So we're still working out as a coalition what our main kind of focus dates are going to be, but we know that there's there's the next IPCC report, so the latest climate science on adaptation report coming out at the end of this month. I think it's the 25th of February. There's going to be a meeting between key ministers of different countries as part of the UN process, the COP process, in March, where loss and damage will be on the agenda. There's various moments in those kind of UN spaces. So there's a dialogue, something that was set up by COP26. It was called the Glasgow Dialogue on Loss and Damage, which is arguably, it's just a substitute for real action. It's a way of kicking the can down the road again, but it does create a space where the issue of finance can be brought forward, and hopefully progress can be made. And those dialogues will be starting in June. I think what we're on the lookout for is a key moment that will resonate more with UK audiences, because although this is an international issue, it's a UK focused campaign, and we want to link it to moments that people in this country are aware of. So that's something that we're still working on. But I think it's likely that we'll be working towards a kind of a key moment later in the year, possibly September with UN Climate Week, but with some kind of, points along the way as well where people can take action.
Great, thank you, Livy. There were two people with their hands up. Chris Martin, did you have your question answered?
Yes, more or less.
Great, thank you. John Kaganga, did you want to ask a question?
Yes. Do you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you so much because you have introduced me. I'm Kaganga John, and I'm from Uganda. I'm working with the local community organization, and I was also part of COP26, and I participated in many meetings about loss and damage. I'm very grateful to be part of this meeting. My first question is that the presenter said that if you want to join the campaign, and I'm a climate activist. Maybe I didn't mention, I've been a climate activist, and I participated in many activities to do with the campaign, and even the campaign, which the global campaign, which was the summit within Scotland. But I would like to see how we people, because as from the presentation, we people from the developing countries are suffering. But how can we join the campaign? Two, we have an initiative which we have come up with. As you say, the polluter pays. We say that people from the developing countries can partner with the people from developed countries, or people who pollute, who contribute a lot for the pollution, so that we can come we can team up and see how we can assist. But also, I'm trying to see how we can come up and see how we can work together. Then, last but not least, there is a problem with loss and damage, because when I was attending COP26, this question came up. When we are not many people, whether it is from developed countries or from developing countries, who understand how can this compensation, is it a compensation? Is it a reward? I mean, how do they want to get a proper word? Because even the magnitude, what is the loss and damage which can be compensated, or which can be the proper word to compensate or to pay for loss and damage? We need a proper word. I think let me first stop there, then I give even other people a chance. But I'm so happy to be part of this meeting. I will be contributing. Because I've been following loss and damage, and I've been advocating for polluter pays. I have already set up a sort of a movement which I would like to amplify.
Thank you. It's really great to have you here and to hear from you. I think you're right. It's really important that I think this campaign and its demands need to be led from, what people in the global south are saying, but equally we're starting a UK-based campaign on this because we can't leave it all to people in the global south. It's really important that there are voices in the global north as well who are pushing our countries and our governments to take action. So I think, yeah, it would be brilliant to collaborate and to find out more about what you're doing. I'll put my email address in the chat if you want to get in touch that way.
Thank you so much.
We also have a question from Willem Buttinger.
Yes, hi, Libby. I drive my car, and when I drive, I am the one who's polluting. So taking it out to the ground, the oil and coal, is not the pollution. The pollution is when we use it. So shouldn't I, as the consumer, pay the cost?
I mean, it's a good question, and ultimately we need some form of a tax on carbon, whatever we call that, however we structure that. I think it's very important that that doesn't disproportionately impact people who are struggling to pay their bills and who have no choice but to use fossil fuels. Because right now, I don't choose to heat my flat with gas. That's the only option that's available to me realistically. I would love to get, we're talking about minutiae here, but I'd love to get an air source heat pump, for example, but that's not an option really that's open to me. So I think we have to look at the systemic level, at the people who have the power to change this. And, because there's a certain amount that individuals and consumers can do, but that's very limited in the context of the system that we all operate in. So I think it is important to look at that kind of upstream level, at the level of the fossil fuel companies who, let's face it, have known about climate change for 50 years and have been systematically lying about it and are still making massive profits. So yes, there's a role for the consumer, but I think it's ultimately the responsibility, it lies with those in power.
Great, thank you, Livia. I think we've got time for one more question. Bonnie Evans-Hills, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, thank you. I mean, I'm really interested in this idea of working, within the UK, and I'm thinking, that there are companies such as down the road from me, in a place called Mossmoran, Shell operates a process whereby it takes out gas from under the ground, and then the end product of what they're doing is plastic. But also there's all kinds of releases, pollutants that are released into the air as well, and the local people are suffering from asthma and that sort of thing. So it's like, how can we within the UK focus on the major polluters existent within the UK? Is there a way of focusing on that?
It's another good question, and I think there's kind of a couple of related but distinct issues in what you raise, which is the impact of pollution of specific extractive activities, right, which affect the air quality and the soil and water of their immediate surroundings. And it's really important that people in communities affected by those projects have a say, have influence over what projects can go ahead in their area, that when they do happen, that they benefit from them economically, and that the money doesn't all leave the area. And that there is proper redress for when environmental standards are not met, and those kinds of issues. There's also the wider issue of, when we're referring to loss and damage, it's more the widespread loss and damage that's occurring globally as a result of climate change caused by concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So obviously those two things are connected. But I think it's important to differentiate between them. But to what I think was your main question, yes, there are companies operating in the UK. There are also companies that are primarily operating elsewhere in the world, but have their base in, their headquarters in the City of London. And I think that's also a really powerful thing that UK campaigners can do, and I think might relate to what Adam's going to talk to us about in a minute as well, which is that a lot of these companies, their power and their money, they have that base in London, and we need to be holding them to account.
Great, thank you, Livy. Thanks so much for talking about the Make Polluters Pay campaign. I just want to say, everyone, that there's going to be a chance to discuss the campaign more in the breakout rooms. So please hang on until then if you have any more questions. We'll post them in the chat and we'll try and pick them up on the way.